My parents forgot my birthday for the seventh year in a row. That same day, they threw my sister a surprise party at my house. Without telling me, I came home to 60 strangers in my living room. I didn't scream. I walked straight to the breaker box, cut the power, and left one note on the door. The mortgage is also cut as of today. My name's Macaulay. I'm 31 years old and I pour drinks for a living. Craft cocktails at a place called The Meridian, which sounds fancier than it actually is, but only barely. I need to tell you about the night I came home to 60 strangers in my living room on my birthday, threw the breaker on every single one of them, and left a note that ended a financial arrangement I'd been pretending was love for 3 years running. But let me back up, because without the context, the breaker box just sounds dramatic. With the context, I promise you, it sounds like the first sensible thing I'd done in a long time. My family is from Terre Haute, Indiana, a mid-sized city that had once been on its way to becoming something and then quietly decided against it. We lived in a neighborhood called Briar Glen, which had one actual briar bush that I was aware of, and otherwise consisted of chain link fences and above-ground pools and streets named after trees that no longer existed. My parents were Frank and Diane. Frank ran a small roofing crew. Diane worked the front office at an insurance agency for 19 years. They weren't cruel. I want to establish that up front, because this story is not about cruel people. It's about the particular damage done by well-meaning people who simply never examine their assumptions. There are three of us. My sister Elise is 34 and is the kind of person who performs her emotions at a volume that our parents, who communicated primarily through implication and the weather report, found absolutely miraculous. A child who showed them how she felt in real time. They orbited her like she was a small, radiant planet. My dad communicated primarily through grunts in college basketball. So the fact that Elise would grab his hand and say, "Dad, I need you to hear this," was basically a religious experience for the man. My brother Caden is 26. He's borrowed money from every adult in a 20-mile radius, failed out of one trade program, and still gets invited to everything first because my parents describe him with genuine warmth as a free spirit. He is a person who has been permitted repeatedly and without consequence to be everyone else's problem. But he's charming about it. And in my family, charm has always been the main currency. And then there's me. I was the one who got a job at 16 and didn't mention it. The one who figured out that the family machine ran more smoothly when I didn't create friction. And so I stopped. And then I stopped existing in any way that required the machine to acknowledge me. Not invisible out of malice. Just habit. The habit of a family arranged around two brighter focal points that had simply forgotten to count heads. Here's the accumulation, because it always accumulates. Elise's 16th birthday, my parents rented the back room at a steakhouse, invited 43 people, had a custom cake made. My 16th birthday, my mom left a grocery store cake on the counter between work and picking up Caden from somewhere. It was still partially frozen when I cut it. She said we'd celebrate properly when things settled down. Things did not settle down. My 17th birthday, nothing. My 18th, nothing. We are now at 7 years, but I'm getting ahead of myself. When I got accepted into a hospitality program at 20, my dad squinted at the brochure and said, "You want to work in bars?" I said it was a professional program covering beverage management and operations. He set the brochure down and said, "As long as you've got a plan," in the voice he used for things that were not his department. 3 years ago, my parents called with the asking voice. My mom has an asking voice. It gets softer at the edges, like she's turning the wattage slightly down. She said they were having trouble with the mortgage, that Caden had moved back in, that things were tight. By the time she'd finished, I had already said yes, $1,200 a month. Their full mortgage payment, every month, bank transfer, no variability. I did it because I love them. And also, the part Dr. Tatum helped me see clearly later, because I had spent 30 years believing that if I was useful enough, they would eventually see me. That if I contributed enough, I could buy my way into the version of their attention they'd been giving freely to everyone else. I want to tell you about a Tuesday in March, about 8 months before my birthday, because it's the moment the pattern stopped being invisible to me. I drove 4 hours to Terre Haute for my nephew Oliver's school play. He's 7, Caden's kid, and he had a role as a talking tree, which he took very seriously and deserved an audience that took him seriously. And so I drove. After the show, we went to a pizza place, all of us around one long table. Elise was describing a kitchen renovation she was planning. My parents were nodding with great intensity. Somewhere between the salad and the food arriving, my dad turned to me and asked, "Genuinely, I don't think it was performance. So what's new with you, Mac?" I had something. For once, I actually had something. The Meridian's cocktail menu had been written up in a regional magazine 2 weeks earlier. They'd called it the most intentional cocktail program currently operating in Columbus. I'd spent 4 months on that menu. 4 months of sourcing and testing and rebuilding recipes from the ground up. So I told him, I said, actually, the menu I developed got a really good write-up. They called it, and my mom said, "That's wonderful, honey," and turned back to Elise. The table moved on in 9 seconds. I counted because I had nothing else to do. I told myself it was fine. I was very good at telling myself things were fine. I should have charged for that service. Now here is September 14th, my birthday. Every year, September 14th, I am a Virgo, which my best friend Declan claims explains my entire personality, and which I refuse to take seriously, but also cannot entirely dismiss. I had worked a double the day before and taken the 14th off. I slept in properly for the first time in 2 weeks. I made eggs from the farmer's market and sourdough from the bakery on the corner. My cat Roosevelt observed from his position on the radiator, with the studied disinterest he applies to everything that doesn't directly benefit him. Declan, who has, in 4 years of friendship, never once been on time for anything, but always eventually arrives and always brings the correct thing, texted at 10, "Birthday man, dinner tonight. I'm paying, and that's non-negotiable." I sent back a thumbs up, and then, because apparently hope is the last thing to leave the building, I checked my phone for a message from my parents. Nothing. I told myself they were probably going to call later. They'd probably forgotten the time difference, even though there is no time difference between Terre Haute and Columbus. I walked to the coffee shop. I bought a book. I sat in the park for an hour in the September air, which was genuinely nice, and I told myself several more things that I was starting to suspect I was only telling myself. At 5 o'clock, Declan texted that he was running about 20 minutes late. Could we push dinner to 7? I said sure, and walked home. I heard the party before I opened the door. Music. Specific music. A playlist I recognized because I had shared it to our family group chat 6 months earlier. And apparently, someone had saved it. Then, voices, plural, the specific ambient noise of many people existing in a contained space. I stopped on the landing and stood there for a moment, trying to reconcile what I was hearing with what should reasonably be happening in my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon. I opened the door. 60 people, give or take. I counted later because I am who I am. They were distributed across every surface of my apartment, standing in the kitchen, sitting on my windowsill, holding drinks from a cooler that someone had placed directly next to my cast iron skillet, which I have had for 9 years and treat accordingly. There were pink balloons, not birthday general pink balloons, balloons with a large cursive E on each one. There was a cake on my kitchen counter with white frosting and pink roses, written across it. "Happy birthday, Elise." Elise's birthday is September 16th. My mother was standing in my kitchen, holding a serving tray. She turned and saw me, and her face did a specific thing. A brief, visible recalculation. The look of someone working out a problem they hadn't expected to encounter. Then she smiled. She actually produced a full smile and said, "Macaulay, there you are. Come in, don't stand in the doorway." My father was on the couch. He raised one hand in my direction, the same gesture he used for the television. Elise appeared from the hallway, and she at least had the honesty to look uncertain. She said, "Mac, I didn't know they were going to do it here," and I held up one hand, and she stopped. "I want to tell you what actually got to me. Not the balloons, not the cake with the wrong name, not the 60 strangers in my apartment, one of whom was using my good kitchen towel as a napkin. What got to me was the key. My parents had a spare key I'd given them for emergencies. Pipe bursts, that kind of thing. They had used it to admit 60 people into a space I paid for on my birthday to celebrate my sister, and not one person in the planning of this event had thought to mention it to me. The word mention is doing heavy lifting there. Not ask, not check, just mention. Let me know, text once. I stood in the doorway for approximately 4 seconds. I turned around, walked down the hall, down the stairs, out the back exit, around to the utility closet, which I have a key to because I am someone who asks for every key available. I opened the breaker box, found the main, flipped it, the music stopped, every window on my floor went dark. 60 people went quiet simultaneously, which is genuinely one of the stranger sounds I've encountered. I walked back to the front door, which someone had opened. Phone, flashlights, everywhere. Someone saying what happened. I took out the notepad I keep in my jacket, recipe notes, usually, and wrote 2 lines. Taped the note to the inside of the door at eye level. Walked to my car and drove to Declan's apartment. The note said, "Happy birthday to Elise. The mortgage is also cut. As of today." Declan opened his door, looked at my face for about 3 seconds, and said, "Okay, come in." He didn't ask questions for the first hour. He put on a game, ordered food, and at some point, I texted my neighbor Briggs to go retrieve Roosevelt from the situation. And Briggs did it without asking why, which is the kind of person Briggs is. Roosevelt arrived 20 minutes later with the expression of someone who had seen things. The calls came in the order I expected. My mom first, 3 times the first evening. Then Elise. Then my dad once. Then my mom again. I texted my mother, "I need 30 days. Please don't call." She called 6 more times. My dad stopped after 2. Caden, to no one's surprise, did not call at all. I found out from Elise, who I eventually spoke to because she had been honest with me in the doorway, and that counted for something. They'd been planning it for 3 weeks. She'd raised it twice. Shouldn't they tell Macaulay? And my mother's response was that I wouldn't mind, because I was always so easygoing. I want you to hold that phrase. Always so easygoing. What my mother interpreted as my easygoing nature was, in fact, 22 years of practiced invisibility. The absence of complaint is not the same as the absence of feeling. The additional layer, which I discovered while sitting in Declan's apartment on my birthday with Roosevelt on my lap. My mother had posted to Facebook a photo collage from the party. Roosevelt was in one of the photos, sitting on the cooler, characteristically unimpressed. The caption read, "Surprised our girl Elise. So much love in this family." 47 reactions. I put my phone face down and didn't touch it for 2 hours. The silence lasted 9 weeks before someone reached out for a reason unrelated to what I'd done with the breaker and the mortgage. My dad left a voicemail, quieter than his usual register, careful in a way he rarely is, saying there was an issue with the gutters and could I help him think through it. He did not mention September 14th. He did not mention the party or the mortgage or the note, just the gutters. I listened to it twice and did not call back. Meanwhile, I was seeing Dr. Tatum, who has a small philodendron on her windowsill that she addresses occasionally between sessions, and who Declan had pointed me toward 8 months earlier with characteristic subtlety. "Mac, you need someone who isn't me." Dr. Tatum does not solve things. She reframes them. There is a difference, and it matters. What she said in the session after my birthday was this: "You've been paying rent in a house you're not actually allowed to live in. Financially, yes, but in every other way too. You believed that if you contributed enough, they would eventually let you in through the same door they'd always left open for everyone else." She let it sit. Then she said, "What would it look like to stop waiting for a door that was never going to open for you?" I sat with that for 3 weeks, and somewhere in those 3 weeks, I felt something shift. Not dramatically, not all at once, but like a foundation settling into ground it had always meant to reach. In October, my boss Sloan told me she was opening a second Meridian and wanted me as beverage director across both locations. Real title, real salary, real scope. She said, "I have committed this to memory. You are the most emotionally perceptive person I have ever had behind a bar. And I don't say that as a compliment. I say it as a fact, because you need to know what you're worth." She said it while looking at an inventory spreadsheet, not at me. Then she looked up and said, "So, yes, I said yes. Declan and I opened a bottle we'd been saving for something significant and drank it on a Tuesday, which is our day regardless. The confrontation happened in November. I drove to Terre Haute without calling ahead. My mother answered the door and did the recalculating face again. Slower this time. We sat at the kitchen table, same four chairs, same decorative fruit in the bowl that was never for eating. I said, September 14th, my birthday. 7 consecutive years. No call, no message, no acknowledgement of any kind. I have phone records if that's in question. It wasn't in question. You used my spare key, which I gave you for plumbing emergencies, to bring 60 people into an apartment whose mortgage I have been paying on my birthday to celebrate a lease, without telling me. I have the Facebook post. I also have 43 months of bank transfers, totaling $51,600. My mother said we were going to pay that back. My dad said, Mac, now. I said, I'm not here to fight. I'm not here for an apology, though I wouldn't refuse one. I'm here because I needed to say this out loud, in this kitchen, in front of you, so that it exists somewhere other than inside me. There was a silence I didn't try to fill. My father stared at the table. Then he said something I had genuinely not prepared for. He said, in a flat and honest voice, we didn't think about you. He didn't explain it further. Didn't qualify it or dress it up. He just said it like a man reading a fact off a page. We didn't think about you. It was the most honest sentence he had ever directed at me, and it landed exactly as hard as 31 years of accumulated evidence said it would. My mother apologized. Not perfectly. She circled a few times before landing. But genuinely, I think. She said she hadn't understood how much had accumulated. She said the word accumulated like she'd just discovered it applied to her. Elise cried and said she should have pushed back harder. I told her I believed her. I do. Caden was not there. He had not made himself available. That, too, was information. My name is Macaulay. I'm 31 years old, and I run the cocktail programs at 2 bars now. And last Tuesday, Declan and I finished a very good bottle of something and debated the entire last season of a show we'll both pretend we don't watch. Roosevelt has claimed the south-facing windowsill and regards me daily with the specific contempt of someone who is entirely aware of how loved they are. My parents and I talk. Not with the old architecture built in. Not with me reaching first and longest every time. My mother called on my birthday this year. 8 in the morning. She'd set a phone reminder. I could tell, and I didn't find it pathetic. I found it evidence of someone trying, at 63, to learn a different habit. My dad texts occasionally. In March, unprompted, he sent a photo of a landscaping job with an unusual herb border along the edge. He said he'd thought of something I'd mentioned once about growing your own garnishes. He remembered a thing I said. I saved the photo. Here's what I'm done waiting for. The room to light up when I walk in. I spent 30 years trying to register in my family the way Elise did, the way Caden did. I have stopped trying. Not out of bitterness. Bitterness requires ongoing energy I've redirected. Out of clarity. I have a bar. I have a program. I have Declan and Roosevelt and Briggs, who retrieved my cat from a party without asking why, and Sloan, who told me what I was worth while staring at a spreadsheet, and Dr. Tatum's philodendron, which has grown noticeably since September. The door I was waiting for was never going to open, so I built my own. It's a good door, solid frame, works perfectly. I'm very particular about who has the key.